is January 21st, 2009. This will be case number RIF 127889. It's approximately 2:37 p.m. This will be the interview of Dale Harvey.
Hello?
Hello, is Dale Harvey there, please?
Speaking.
Hi, Dale. My name is Susan Zappia, and I'm an investigator with Riverside County DA's office. How are you today?
I'm peachy.
Good. I don't know if you got the message from Michael Brusselback regarding the, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Wehry case? W-E.
Whatever, I don't really care. I know the case.
I was going to ask you a few questions. He gave me a list here to ask you, so if you just bear with me. I know it's been a few years since you've worked on this case, so totally understand if you don't remember any specific answers.
I will be happy to tell you precisely what I can answer.
All right. Thanks, Dale. First question is, what was your role in perverted justice in 2006?
In 2006, I was functioning as the liaison for law enforcement, also known as the Information First Coordinator.
Okay.
I also was a contributor and sometimes verifier.
Okay.
Basically, I did everything.
Okay. Now, in the Muraloma Riverside Dateline sting in 2006, do you remember what your role was at that time?
At that time, I was serving not only as the physical decoy, meaning the individual that these guys were following into the house, but also as a verifier on a number of the cases.
Now, when you mean verified, what do you mean by that?
A verifier is someone who places the phone call to the individual who is chatting with the contributor online. Okay.
In this particular case, obviously you said you were the phone verifier and the decoy in the house, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see a copy of the emails between the defendant and Greg Brainer, who was the original online profile before the phone verification?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Did you see a copy of the emails between our subject or defendant and Greg Brainer, who was the online profiler before the phone verification?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And how did you receive the emails?
Via email.
Okay, so you received the email through your email.
Correct.
Now,
I do not have that at this point.
Okay, that's fine. And you did look through them and review them, correct?
I did, and I can tell you that that is standard operating procedure, which is how I know that most clearly. That is that the verifier, if you're a contributor verifier, then a lot of times you will review the chat log before you make the call to ensure that when you're on the call, you don't do anything to throw things off.
Right. You basically want the history of the conversation.
Exactly.
Obviously to carry it into the phone call.
Precisely, because, for example, I know you don't really need all this information, but I figure it may help you to hear it.
No
I don't stop me if you feel like it. I won't be hurt.
No, I'd like to hear how you guys do all this. This is very interesting to me.
Okay, well, essentially what we would do in certain instances is we like to know the background of the story when we're placing the phone call because, for example, if the guy says, oh, what was your birthday again?
Oh, right.
You don't want to pause.
Right.
You don't want to be like, oh, my birthday. Huh, yeah.
I
have one.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, because that's really awkward. And the same thing applies for, where are your parents again?
Right.
What are you doing again this weekend? Like, it's just the kind of thing where you want to make sure that you aren't accidentally, really screwing up a case. And you could in a number of ways because, if the person had reason to believe that they weren't speaking to the person who they thought they were speaking to, that certainly doesn't do any good anywhere.
Correct.
So I can say categorically that I absolutely reviewed them before making a phone call, especially since in his instance, rather than it being purely an instant message conversation, there were emails involved.
Right, so it's easier for you to look at the hard copies,
know the history, because that is the only case, to my recollection, in Riverside like that. So even though I don't remember the details, I do remember that aspect of it.
Okay. Now, do you recall what you say or do to verify which suspect you're talking about, reference to email or chat logs?
Essentially, well, with him, the verification call was particularly lovely because he called and I answered in a girl voice.
Okay.
And since he was confused, I quickly figured out I wasn't supposed to be a girl for that phone call. And instead of like, oh no, I'm over here studying, I don't remember the exact context of it, but the summary would be that I said, oh, I was the kid's study partner. I was just over there. He was in the backyard.
Okay.
And that I would have him call him back. And then at that point when I waited like 5 minutes and then called him back as the boy.
Right.
There's certain confusing things when you're playing both genders, and that's just one of them. You can't do much about it.
At least you remember that about this case. So
yeah, thank God.
Right.
It's nice to have these things, especially given that apparently this is going to be a nightmare for poor Mike. I feel horrible.
Yeah.
So call him back as a kid, basically reassure him, oh, whatever, my study partner's nosy. She opened it, or she answered the phone. Sorry about that. She's a bitch, whatever.
Right.
And then I don't remember any of the other details, honestly. I just remember that he was going to come. I think he was walking, I seem to recall. So it took him a while.
Okay.
And I then actually do remember him arriving at the house. Miracle of miracles.
Okay.
And I remember what he looks like enough to identify him.
Okay, good. Now, how many phone verifications did you do?
And Riverside?
Yes.
I honestly have no idea.
Okay. And
I know. See, the thing is that I know that I did, I think, all of Jay's, but I've only been called for about, I want to say maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 8.
Okay.
But, again, that's really an estimate. And, if you want, I can actually look that information up, but I don't know it.
So at least 8, you would say, which is a comfortable, and it's just the estimation, so would that be a safe number then?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Now, was this a dedicated phone line or number that you used?
It was a track phone, which is our way of making sure that we don't have, the guy who owns the house's best hunting partner calling in and getting a conversation that they don't want.
Right.
So if it's just, I actually think this was the first time that track phone was ever used. It was a brand new number, so the only people with that number were the people who we had given the number to.
Okay, and is this phone through your company or through the DA's office or the?
At the time, I believe that it was through, I think it was actually through ours.
Okay. Now, he also wants me to ask you to explain your role as a decoy in the house.
Okay. Basically what I would do is say somebody would start pulling up to the house. Mm-hmm. A lot of times they'd want to see the kid before they came in. And that's where I came in handy, as it turns out. Essentially what I would generally do is go outside, wave at them, maybe say something idiotic like I spilled Diet Coke on my shorts, come on in, I got to change, I'll be right back down. Or I got a piece of chip stuck in my tooth. I got to go floss.
Right.
That they would generally see me, and for the guys, I was wearing, a hoodie and baggier jeans and a baseball hat, and I had my hair up so they couldn't see it, because I like to at least think that normally I don't look like a boy or a 13-year-old boy at least.
Right.
So basically, it's the hey, come on in. If they were walking up to the house of their own accord, then all I would really do is, maybe yell out or open the door for them and then go inside the house. So they couldn't see me clearly. But usually it was just the fact that they caught a glimpse of what looked like it could be a kid.
Right.
That they would follow me in.
Okay. So your role basically was somehow to get them, whether looking at you or a motion from you, to get them to come into the house.
Correct. Whether it was just by voice or whether it was, me actually gesturing to them, my role there was to convince them that the kid that they were there for was there and waiting for them to come in.
And after they came into the house, what did you do?
Got out of the way.
Okay.
Essentially, I would not be in the area when they walked into the house, and I'd be like, hey, can you hang out at the kitchen counter for a second? I'll be there in a second.
Right.
I'm going to go change, whatever. And at that point, Chris Hansen would usually walk out and be like, hello there.
Right.
Can you tell me what you're doing?
And then you start the interview at that point.
Exactly.
Now, please describe the standard operating procedure of PJ for the myeloma thing to the best of your memory. Assuming that was pretty much what you did, would that be what you just described?
Standard operating procedure would be from start to finish.
Okay.
Essentially, someone would go online with an underage profile. They would sit in a chat room and wait for someone else to initiate a conversation.
Okay.
Once that person initiated a conversation, they would converse back and wait for the other person to initiate not only talk of sex, but also talk of meeting. And not only talk of sex like, have you ever had sex, but talk of specific sex like, would you have sex with me?
Right.
In no instance did we bring up, hey, do you want to meet me? Or something horrifying like that. Or alternately, they could just put emails out, put a profile out saying, hey, I'm in this area, I'm looking for friends. And then, they could exchange emails, which I believe is what happened in the Wehry/whatever other name he has case.
Mm-hmm.
At some point in time, we attempt to get a phone number from the individual, not only to assist in convincing them that it is a child that they are talking to, but also to help identify them, and that having a phone number can be pretty helpful.
Right.
In order to do the verification call convincingly, since I was placed at the house, I did read the chat logs for those cases that I was calling, and actually I read all of the chat logs anyway because I approved them.
Right.
So I would have read it twice. And in terms of once they've been approved, once they've been cleared, the other person is initiated. Sorry?
Right. You want to make sure that the chat logs are appropriate, that there wasn't...
I want to make sure that the chat logs have, A, had the other person initiate talk of meet, B, initiate talk of sex, and C, that our age requirements are in place.
Okay.
So once all that's been done and the verification call's been made, then they're allowed to schedule the individual to show up at the house.
Okay.
Once they show up at the house, or once they're on the way, we'll keep an eye out for them, write down whatever information we have about them, if they're on car, if they're on foot, what kind of car they have, if they have a car, all that kind of information.
Mm-hmm.
We then take that information and basically use that to keep an eye out for them. Once we see them at the house, then I would call out, hopefully in the correct gender, assuming that we identified the right person,
Right.
Hey, come on in. I'm just going to go wipe my shirt off. Whatever.
And then, obviously, we talked about the rest.
Correct.
Now, what is your current position or role with PJ?
I'm one of the 3 administrators, and I'm the custodian of evidence, I suppose. That's not really my official position. I guess I'm co-administrator, and I think I'm the secretary, too, actually. I think co-administrator is probably the easiest
Do you
position.
still approve chat logs and things like that? Or you?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And I teach police occasionally.
Okay. And that would be it. Do you have any questions for me? I don't know, I guess have you talked to Mike about the case?
Yeah, poor Mike.
Yeah.
I would kill the guy myself. I would at least punch him if he was in front of me.
Well, I'm sure he'll deal with it okay.
I'm sure he will, but it's a rotten thing to have happen.
Right.
So, like I've said, I'm as available as I possibly can be as long as it gives me 24 hours notice. I'm in Burbank.
Okay.
So I can drive out to Riverside.
And how many cases have you testified previous to this?
Oh, God.
Numerous, I'm assuming?
20, maybe?
Okay.
20 plus.
Okay.
The worst was on an Air Force base. That
my
really
goodness.
sucked.
Yeah.
I had to go out there for a total of 3 weeks for a total of 5 minutes of testifying. I was like, really?
Wow.
I hate the Army now.
Yeah.
Or the Air Force, at least.